Imagine it's negative 20 degrees outside. Wind is cutting straight through whatever you're wearing. Because what you're wearing isn't really clothing. It's just a loose animal hide. Draped over your shoulders and tied at the waist, it doesn't wrap around your arms. It doesn't cover your legs. Every time the wind shifts, cold air pours straight through the gaps. You're not just uncomfortable. You're losing the fight. Your fingers are going numb. Your feet, wrapped in scraps of fur that keep sliding off, are next. And somewhere out past the tree line, the temperature is about to drop another 10 degrees the moment the sun goes down. This is what winter looked like for early humans moving into cold parts of the world. Not a walk to the thermostat. A slow, grinding battle against a cold that never let up, wearing clothes that were really just animal skins thrown over the body and hoped for the best. And then at some point someone solved it. Not with fire. Not with a bigger cave. With a tool so small you could lose it in your palm and forget it was there. A sliver of bone no thicker than a matchstick, sharpened to a point, with a tiny hole drilled through one end. The needle. It doesn't look like much. It looks like nothing, actually, next to spears and hand axes and fire, but archaeologists increasingly think this tiny piece of bone did something those other tools couldn't. It might be the reason your ancestors survived an ice age that other human species didn't. So how do you go from draping a hide over your shoulders to sewing a fitted, wine-blocking garment? And why did it take so unbelievably long for someone to figure it out? Let's start with the actual problem. Cold isn't just uncomfortable, it's a direct threat to survival, and it works fast. Wet skin loses heat dramatically faster than dry skin, and wind moving across exposed skin strips heat away even quicker. Combine wind, wet, and cold together, and hypothermia can set in within hours, sometimes less. Loose hides help. They're better than nothing. But a loose hide has gaps. It moves when you move. It lets air in at the neck, the wrists, the ankles, everywhere the drape doesn't quite reach. If you're standing still by a fire, that might be fine. If you're walking 20 miles across open tundra, hunting an animal that's also trying to survive the same cold, those gaps are where your body heat leaks out, hour after hour, until you're too cold to think straight. For most of human history, this was just accepted. You dealt with it. You huddled closer to the fire. You accepted that cold weather meant a slower, more dangerous version of everything you needed to do to stay alive. Then, sometime in a window researchers place somewhere between roughly 40,000 and 60,000 years ago, that changed. The oldest known needle-like tool was found in a cave in Siberia, carved from a bird bone with a hole worked through one end for thread. It's small enough to fit across your palm, and it's old enough that it wasn't even made by a modern human. It was almost certainly made by a Denisovan, one of the other human species that no longer exists. Bone needles start turning up after that across an enormous stretch of the ancient world. Siberia, the Caucasus, East Asia, eventually Europe. Different regions, different toolkits, similar solution. Which raises the question, if it's such a simple idea, why did it take hundreds of thousands of years of humans wearing draped skins before somebody actually built it? Because on paper, the needle looks obvious. A point, a hole, a thread. You'd think someone would have stumbled onto it out of pure boredom sitting by a fire. But making a needle requires solving 4 separate, genuinely difficult problems in the correct order, using tools that had to already exist first. Problem 1. You need a strong, thin, straight piece of material that won't snap the second you push it through leather. Wood splinters. Stone shatters. Antler is workable but coarse. Bone, specifically the dense, splinter-resistant bone from a bird's wing or leg, turned out to be close to perfect. But you don't just find a needle-shaped piece of bone lying around. You have to shape it from a much bigger, much clumsier bone fragment, grinding and scraping it down over what was likely hours of tedious, repetitive work with nothing but stone tools and patience. Problem 2. You need a point sharp enough to pierce hide, but not so brittle it snaps on the first stitch. That's a balance you only find through trial, error, and a lot of broken attempts. Problem 3, and this is the one that actually separates a needle from a simple awl. You need a hole. Not just any hole, a hole small enough to keep the tool structurally sound, but wide enough to thread a material through, drilled through solid bone using nothing but another. Harder point applied with rotating pressure. Over and over, without cracking the piece you've already spent hours shaping. One wrong twist and you've destroyed everything you worked for, and you're starting over from a fresh piece of bone. And problem 4, the one that's easy to forget entirely. You need thread. Something thin, strong, and flexible enough to pass through that tiny hole and hold a seam under stress. Early humans solved this with sinew, the tough, fibrous tissue from animal tendons, which had to be separately harvested, cleaned, and split down into usable strands. So before you've sewn a single stitch, you've already had to master working bone, drilling stone-hard material with precision, and processing animal tissue into thread. The needle isn't one invention. It's 4 inventions stacked on top of each other, and every layer had to work before the tool did anything at all. Once someone actually pulled it off, what changed wasn't just warmth. It was what became possible with that warmth. A draped hide is one size fits nobody. A sewn garment can be fitted. Sleeves that actually wrap around the arm, hoods that seal around the face, layers that overlap instead of gap. Some researchers argue this is the real turning point. Not just clothing that covers you, but clothing engineered to trap heat against the body the way modern thermal layers do. And that difference in insulation could mean the difference between a group that can only hunt on mild days and a group that can hunt through a blizzard. That matters enormously if you're trying to survive somewhere like Ice Age Siberia, where winter temperatures could sit well below freezing for months at a stretch, and the animals you depend on for food don't stop moving just because it's cold. Here's where it gets genuinely unsettling. The timing of the eyed needle lines up closely with the period when Neanderthals, a species that had thrived in Ice Age Europe for hundreds of thousands of years, disappear from the fossil record. Neanderthals made clothing too. Evidence suggests they used stone scrapers to prepare hides, but there's very little sign they were sewing fitted. Layered garments the way modern humans in cold regions were starting to. Some researchers think that gap, tailored versus draped, warm versus merely covered, might have been one of several quiet advantages that tipped survival odds in favor of our species during a brutal, prolonged cold period. Nobody's claiming a bone needle single-handedly wiped out an entire other species. That's not how extinction works. It's never one clean cause. But in a world where the margin between living through winter and not living through winter could be a matter of degrees, better insulation is not a small advantage. It's compounding. Warmer people hunt more successfully. Successful hunters feed more children. More children means a population that can absorb a bad season instead of collapsing under it. Multiply that across dozens of winters, and a tiny sliver of sharpened bone starts to look less like a craft tool and more like a survival technology on the same level as fire. And it didn't stop at clothing. Once you can sew, you can build a sealed leather tent instead of a lean-to. You can make an enclosed boot instead of wrapped fur. You can stitch a container that actually holds water. The needle is small, but it's the kind of tool that quietly rewrites what a small group of humans is capable of building, everywhere from the inside of a hide coat to the walls of their shelter. So the next time you thread a needle in about 2 seconds without thinking about it, or pull on a jacket that fits snugly around your wrists so no wind gets in, remember what that convenience replaced. Somewhere in an Ice Age cave in the dark, by firelight, someone sat for hours grinding a piece of bird bone against stone. Again and again, failing, starting over, failing again until finally, they had a point, and a hole, and the beginning of every warm coat that's ever been made since.